I began to cross the street. So I'm standing on the sidewalk and I put one foot into the bus lane that is down, so it's like about what, like 4 inches, the height of the
Off of the
curb.
curb. Okay.
Right. So I put my foot down. And then suddenly somebody or something is pulling me from my jacket, like yanking me back onto the sidewalk, like yanking me up and back onto the sidewalk. And in the next instance, a bus is going by right in front of me, right where I would have been if I hadn't been pulled back. And the bus driver was looking at me and shaking his finger like this. And I was just, what? I was just in a state of what? I wasn't even scared or shocked or anything because it all happened so fast.
Yeah.
Uh, and without any warning.
This is Mystic Takeaway, dishing up extraordinary real-life stories to inspire wonder and nourish the soul. I'm Elisa Graff. My guest today is Sabina Qureshi of Edmonton, Canada, whose life was saved many years ago by invisible hands. Good to have you with us. Welcome to Mystic Takeaway. With this first episode, I'd like to share with you what inspired this podcast and what I hope it will bring to you, the listener. I believe life is inherently full of mystery, wonder, and magic. In the rush of daily life in our materially oriented world, we often don't make the space to breathe in life's deeper questions and meaning. The great artists, past and present, painters, poets, and visionaries, have pointed to what exists beyond our everyday perception, and at times, reading a poem by Blake or seeing a painting by Da Vinci, we gain a glimpse into that world of meaning. On this, the intuitive and visionary thinker Albert Einstein is known to have said, "The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science. He to whom the emotion is a stranger, who can no longer pause to wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. His eyes are closed." Pondering the deeper meaning and purpose of life has been a major theme in my life since childhood. I have always been oriented to the mystical, and my profound curiosity to explore and understand life led me to a lifelong practice of meditation starting in my 20s. I've explored lots of spiritual paths and traditions, and I'm an ardent student of the Ageless Wisdom teachings. But I also believe that spirituality is a personal journey, and I have great respect for all paths. All human beings experience transcendent episodes in life when an experience defies our modern understanding of what's even possible. A simple example of this is synchrony, or seemingly impossible coincidences, or surprise encounters that leave us deeply wondering. Some of us have also had near-death experiences, or dramatic life-changing events that lead us to question all that we know or believe about life and what it's all about. This podcast was born out of the spirit that sharing such experiences has the power to inspire us and to open us up to perceive new possibilities in our own lives and in the world around us. Each week, guests share their stories of such miraculous experiences, encounters, and interventions. Coming from diverse backgrounds and beliefs, they share their personal perspectives and insights about these experiences that reflect their own religious or spiritual tradition. These stories are shared to inspire listeners to take away their own meaning from them. This is the central purpose behind Mystic Takeaway. Thanks for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Sabina.
Okay, sure. I live in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. I'm the child of immigrants. My dad was Indian. My mom is Swiss. I grew up in a multicultural household with people from all over the world, multiple languages, and we traveled a lot when I was a child. Later, I didn't want to travel, but I ended up doing it anyway. And I lived in Norway and then Spain. And I've never had a proper career. I trained as a geneticist, but I found that working in a lab wasn't for me. I love being around people. So I became an English teacher, but along the way, I did lots of different jobs. So I've worked in kitchens. I was an ice cream truck driver in Norway.
That's a great, I bet there's some great stories about that.
Yeah, lots of fun ones. For a while, I lived in an orchard in Spain in a tent. So it's just been a varied life, but really interesting, and I've enjoyed it all. I can't call myself an expert on anything, really. So just someone who's enjoyed living, basically.
You just recently moved from Barcelona. You were living there for 10 years or longer?
Yeah, I lived in Barcelona for about 12 years, in Spain for 15. And that was wonderful. I never thought I'd end up living in Spain. Never had any. Well, I always loved the flamenco music.
Yes. Yeah, me too. I have a real
Yeah,
absolute love of flamenco guitar. I love it.
yeah,
Love
it's a
it.
powerful,
It's
powerful
very powerful. Yeah.
vein of music. And I had really fallen in love with the poetry of Federico Garcia Lorca, like way back in my 20s, though
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't read it in Spanish at that time. So learning Spanish, one of the boons was that I could read the poetry of this man in his own language, and it's fantastic.
Oh,
And it makes you
yeah.
realize, no matter how well things are translated, there's something about the original language that you cannot replace.
I can
Uh,
imagine that. Totally. Totally.
so I'm a big fan of people learning multiple languages because I think it enriches you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So you also had to learn Norwegian, I guess?
That's right, I did. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds like a tricky language to learn.
Actually, it's very easy. It's very similar to English.
No
And I'm
kidding.
reading this book by Bill Bryson right now, English, the language and how it got that way. You would
Wow.
love it as an English teacher.
I bet I would love that book. I think Bill Bryson's amazing. He's brilliant. He's so
He
funny.
is. He's such an entertaining writer. You just love reading his words and just going along with his thoughts. It's like you're having coffee with someone that you never want to stop listening.
Okay, that's a really good book recommendation. So you just moved back from Barcelona to Edmonton, Canada, right? In the
That's
last
right.
year.
It'll be 3 years in August, so it's 2.5 about now. It was a culture shock. I had been away for 24 years, and things have changed, of course, as they always do. But I realized that I didn't understand my fellow Canadians.
I bet.
I was really out of sync. I had a completely different way of communicating, of thinking, of feeling.
You were
Uh,
Spanish.
yeah, exactly.
Or
So it took me
Catalan.
a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
Canadians are very understated. Everything's very almost laconic. There's a lot of irony. It's very subtle. And I wasn't ready for the subtlety, I have to say.
I
A lot
understand.
of things just went right over my head in the beginning.
Yeah, actually, I have my own culture shock still living in Germany for 10 years. I still haven't gotten over my culture shock from California to Germany, but it is interesting because there are all these little subtleties. So when I go back to California, I realize I'm actually very European now. It's
Yeah.
strange. I can't even tell you what it is, but there's definitely some things that have,
And you don't realize how much you've become that until you go back home.
yeah,
Because as long as I was in Spain and hadn't come back here, even though I came back for little trips for like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I never encountered that experience. And as long as I kept living in Europe, I just experienced myself as not being European, like how different I was from Europeans.
right, right.
You know that little saying, it takes one to know one?
Yeah.
Well, I think people like you and I who've done this back and forth thing, um, anyone who hasn't, really, they can understand it by proxy, but they can't really imagine it, I don't think.
No, you're right. You're right. There's an uprootedness. There's something very satisfying about it too. I mean, I kind of think of it in the
Yeah.
terms of I want to intentionally, on some level, I want to be a citizen of the world. I don't want to
Yeah.
be identified with one nation, one culture. And
That's
I think I've had that yearning since I was a kid. I was really interested in other countries and other cultures and other languages as a child. So it's not a surprise that I ended up leaving the United States and living abroad for long periods of time. But there are definitely things that you can't replace, things that I do miss about my culture. I didn't even realize until I moved across the world that I had a culture.
that's
It's so
right.
bizarre, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And it's funny the things you realize you miss. Like one of the things that I now miss living here about here that no longer exists here, but it existed when I was growing up, was the train. because they've discontinued this line of the train,
Oh,
the
wow.
Canadian National that used to
Hmm.
come up Calgary. So on a regular basis, like I think every day, I would hear the mournful sound of that train horn as the train came into the station here, or as it left. Like you could hear it across the city, across the south side of the city. And that's no longer so because that line's been discontinued. It's gone. And it's
Wow.
funny how things in your soundscape become part of the fabric of your life and you don't realize that you're missing it. And I remember one of the things I missed when I moved to Spain from Norway was I missed the type of church bells that they have in Northern Europe, which is very different from the Southern Europe, or maybe it's a Protestant Catholic thing, I don't know. But it's a different kind of church bell.
Hmm.
And then when I moved here, I missed the Spanish church bells. There are no church bells here.
Wow.
They don't ring at every hour, or there's none of that.
Yeah. And the nature's so different where you are, right?
Yes, it's very different.
In Europe, Central Europe, my experience too has been that I miss that feeling of wilderness around me. North
Mm,
America is just tons of wilderness. It's very underpopulated compared to Europe.
yeah,
And to get the wilderness experience of, being out in the wilds, you have to go pretty far north.
yeah,
You've got
yeah.
to go all the way up to Norway or to I
That's
guess
right.
the Highlands of Scotland, or to me, I felt like
Hmm.
that was a good place to where you felt sort of like free, like there's this feeling of space.
Well,
Um,
you'll get that if you come south to Spain as well, and
yeah.
even south into France. Yeah.
Germany is surrounded by 9 countries. It doesn't really have a lot of wilderness.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's like that little like one village, the next village, the next.
exactly. Exactly. Right. They've done a good job with what landscape they have, actually. Kind of,
Yeah.
you have this feeling that they really value their forests. They manage them very tightly. My husband always laughs that every tree in Germany has a number.
Well, and the forests in Germany are beautiful. I miss. I miss those old growth, big tree forests. Up
Yeah.
here in the north, we don't get those kind of trees.
No, really?
No.
I always
Mm-mm.
think of Canada as just having everything. Like, yeah.
No, well, that it doesn't. Maybe on the West Coast and maybe in the East, but here where I am, the climate's too harsh. We don't get that. So I miss those really big trees with those giant trunks and those forests that I experienced in Germany, where you literally feel like you're in a Grimm's fairy tale.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's true. Yeah. I wanted to talk to you also today about some of these interesting experiences that you've had. I was thinking about this one where someone saved your life, basically.
that's right. Yeah.
Tell us the details. What happened exactly?
Well, I was working at a little coffee shop that had only 5 tables, and I was the last one to leave in the evening. And the girl who did the kitchen work had already gone home, and I was closing up. It was about midnight, and I stepped out onto the street, and it was deserted because at that time in 1984 in Edmonton, on a weeknight, the streets would be deserted after about 10 or 11 p.m. And it was snowing, big, heavy, those big, fat, soft snowflakes, and they're very big. They're like each flake is about like that big. They're
Right. I've
really
seen that. It's like clumpy snow. It's clumps falling from the sky, right? There's no noise then, right?
no
It's
noise. Exactly. It muffles all sound because as they fall, especially when they're falling thickly through space this way, it creates like a solid wall, basically. There's no airspace left. So sound doesn't travel. So there's no sound. You can't hear anything. So it was silent. And I stepped out onto the sidewalk. And at that time, the way they had the road set up, there was the sidewalk, then there was a bus lane, then there was a tiny raised curb, and then there was the street part for the cars. So in order to cross the street, I had to first cross the bus lane.
Oh,
And
I've seen those in Toronto, actually. I was so confused. I was there for a conference a few years ago, and I was so confused about how to get across the street because there's like there's all these barriers and things, and I wasn't sure. I was looking really carefully because I was really worried about like, am I doing this right? It's
well, I mean, I was doing it wrong. I shouldn't have been crossing the street in the middle of the block. I should have gone to the corner on a crosswalk. I mean, I was jaywalking essentially, but there was no one there. I didn't really think it would matter. There were no cars. There was no traffic. So yeah, it was midnight and there was no one around, and I didn't think there were any police who would catch me either jaywalking. Though that's not always a good thing to think, because I remember getting tickets around the same time for riding my bike like at 3 a.m. I went from the road up onto the sidewalk and then back down on the road. Somewhere in Edmonton's downtown, there was no traffic, no people. And I wasn't thinking that was like illegal, but suddenly there was a policeman there and he gave me a
Oh,
ticket for $10
wow.
just to teach me a lesson.
No kidding. So you were crossing the street. You had to cross the street.
I began to cross the street. So I'm standing on the sidewalk and I put one foot into the bus lane that is down, so it's like about what, like 4 inches, the height of the
Off of the
curb.
curb. Okay.
Right. So I put my foot down. And then suddenly somebody or something is pulling me from my jacket, like yanking me back onto the sidewalk, like yanking me up and back onto the sidewalk. And in the next instance, a bus is going by right in front of me, right where I would have been if I hadn't been pulled back. And the bus driver was looking at me and shaking his finger like this. And I was just, what? I was just in a state of what? I wasn't even scared or shocked or anything because it all happened so fast.
Yeah.
And without any warning, because I didn't hear the bus coming and I hadn't turned my head to look either.
You weren't
Yeah,
even
I
looking.
no, I didn't check. I didn't turn my head both ways to check. I knew there was no bus coming from that side, and that was the side I expected it from, because in fact, the street was one way going that way, but the bus lane went the other way.
Okay. Wow. Complicated.
Yeah,
So,
so I
but
had
and
to look.
because there was all this muffled, this buffering by the snow, you couldn't hear any traffic sounds.
No traffic sounds. No, I didn't hear the bus, even though it was obviously very close, but I didn't hear it. I didn't hear a thing.
But that's
Uh,
incredible. Oh my God. And did you look around to see who pulled you onto
well,
the sidewalk?
yeah, I think I did. I'm not 100%, like the part that's the clearest for me is the moment of stepping down and being pulled back in the bus and the guy going like that. But I'm pretty sure I turned around to see who did that, and there was nobody there.
And there
The
was
sidewalk was,
nobody else on the street. The sidewalk was empty.
no one at all. Not
Wow.
not not just that there was no one right behind me. There was not even anyone like running away, in either direction. There was just nobody.
Wow.
It was all empty.
Wow. Wow. What did you think at that moment? Did you think, what happened? What just happened?
I think I did think that. But the funny thing is that it wasn't a memory that stayed with me. It wasn't something that I continued to ponder or reflect on. I don't know what my mind did with it, but from the moment it happened, I turned around, there was no one there. And then I think on some level, I just kind of discounted it and I carried on. I went home and I didn't think about it anymore, which now seems kind of crazy to me. But
Obviously,
yeah.
obviously, you remember it. You remember it well.
Well, but the thing is, the memory came back to me. And that's the other part that I find astonishing, is that I didn't maintain that memory. It didn't continue to live with me as like one of my memories. So it wasn't until 15 years later, I was living in Norway and I was feeling kind of cut off from North America, as one does.
Yeah.
And I knew of this woman in Colorado who had created a website for miracles. She wanted people to write in about miracles they'd experienced, and she posted those stories there. So I was reading one of the stories, and I think it was her own, in fact. It was a miracle she'd experienced. And so she described riding her horse along the edge of a kind of cliff. And they're riding quite close to the edge. And then suddenly the horse slips and starts to fall off the edge, but not like straight down like this, but like tilting like that. So she's sitting on the horse like this first and then tilted.
Wow.
And so she's thinking, this is it, we're going down. And suddenly the horse righted itself and was back up on top.
Oh,
And
wow.
she knew that that was not possible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, so you wrote to her, or you were reading her story, and
I just
basically,
read the story. Yeah. I may have written to her later, but what happened was at the moment of reading it, when I read the part about how suddenly they were righted, but it was not physically possible, I had this flash and I suddenly remembered that moment on the street. Like it all came back and I was reliving it. And then I realized, oh, that was the same kind of thing. That's basically impossible.
right.
Uh, and it saved my life.
That's
Yeah.
incredible. What a great story. As you're speaking, it's funny because it does sort of prompt memories in me as well, but not to the degree that I felt that somebody intervened, but I had an intuition. There was a big earthquake in California in 1989. It's called the Loma Prieta earthquake in Californian terms. We all have these names for the different ones, the big ones anyway. This was like a 6.9, which is pretty big.
Oh, can you repeat that?
The Loma Prieta, that's where the epicenter was. It was in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And I guess it might be a minor fault line. I was at work. It was about 5 o'clock in the evening. And I was carrying a FedEx package to go down to the lobby. I was on the fourth floor of a building, a business building, and I liked to take the stairwell instead of the elevator. And actually, I was thinking first, I think about taking the elevator, and I put my finger on the button, and then I thought, no, I think I'll take the stairwell. Timing is incredible because if I had been in the stairwell actually fell.
Oh, wow.
And it was very badly damaged. The building had a lot of damage. We had to move out for 6 months while they did repairs. I had my hand on the door, and somehow, I think just before the earthquake started, I thought, I'm going to go back to my office. And I turned around and I was standing in the middle of the lobby for the fourth floor, halfway between the stairwell door and my office door when the earthquake really started. And it was so loud. And actually, if I'd been in the lobby, there were all these mirrors on the walls of the lobby and they all crashed. So if I'd been in the lobby, it would have also been bad. But somehow I knew not to go in the stairwell. Something told me I need to go back to my office.
Yeah.
And I was turning around, just literally halfway before I got to my office and the earthquake started. And it really was a long one. It went on for about, I don't know, maybe it was only 30 seconds, but that's a very long time for an earthquake. And it was so strong. I really honestly thought at that moment that the building's just going to collapse. And this is it. You have these moments in life where you're like, okay, this is it. I'm going to die. And fortunately, I didn't. And the building didn't collapse. But I'm really grateful that I had this intuition. So, there's all these wonderful mysteries about life. It makes it very interesting. But you meet lots of people that have had these kinds of experiences, right?
Oh, I think everybody has. I actually think it's universal. It's something we've all experienced. But like in my case, I had forgotten the experience. I wasn't like carrying that with me, that memory.
Yeah.
For 15 years, it lay dormant until something provoked it or brought it back up. So I think many of us may have had experiences and don't remember them.
Yeah. Do you ever think about it in terms of what actually happened? Do you ever think about who saved you, for example?
Well, I did write in to Share International magazine because the thing is, the story I read about the woman on the horse, she said that she wrote in to Share International magazine and she asked Benjamin Creme if he would ask his master, was she saved by somebody? And he wrote back and said, yes, you were saved. And I don't recall it was either Maitreya or the Master Jesus who saved her. So when I read that, I thought, well, I have to do the same thing. I have to ask too. So I did. I wrote in and asked, and I did get a reply. And the reply was that, yes, I had been saved by the Master Jesus.
So tell us about Share International magazine a little bit, or Share International or Benjamin Creme.
Well, first of all, the simple way to start is with Benjamin Creme, because he founded the magazine and he was the editor-in-chief until his passing in 2016. Benjamin Creme was an artist, a painter. That was his profession. But he was also a disciple of the Ageless Wisdom teachings. And these are teachings which have been, as we call them, ageless. They've been around forever. They're the underpinnings of all of the world's religions. They're the essential teachings about who we are, the nature of life, of human beings, our relationship to the cosmos, where we're going, everything. But these teachings were made more available to the Western public, starting with books published in the 19th century, Helena Blavatsky, Helena Roerich, Alice Bailey, and then Benjamin Creme, who was a student of these books, and he became a disciple of one of the masters. He writes in the foreword to his first book about how he was contacted by one of the masters of wisdom and ended up in a very close relationship with this master, in constant telepathic contact with his master. And as a result of that contact, he was able to transmit information to the rest of us, which has been published in the form of books. and also through the magazine, Share International Magazine. So that's a magazine that he established in order to share information about the Masters of Wisdom. Now, who are they? They're people like ourselves who are simply further along in the path of evolution, the evolution of consciousness. We're all on our way to becoming masters, masters of ourselves. So the Masters of Wisdom are people who have complete mastery over themselves. They cause no harm, either by thought, by action, or by speech, whereas we unknowingly do all the time. We try not to, but we're still in the process of learning and sorting it out. So we do, but that's not a problem, because generally, and Benjamin Creme has said this, we create far more good karma than bad karma. So not to worry.
It's good news.
It is. It's very good news. Given that we're probably quite blind in general as to what we're causing, you know.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. You had another experience that you wanted to share about meeting somebody special in Spain. And I wanted to ask you if you wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Right. Right. Well, so I had lived in an orchard for a few years in Spain with a friend who was a bit of a wild man. He eschewed society and civilization, though he was very happy to benefit from certain things, like, you know, cell phones. But he didn't believe in working for money. He liked to work, but not for money. He was an artist. He did fantastic embroideries, of all things. And so living with him was quite an adventure. And he had long hair, a beard. So he looked a bit like an old hippie, I'd say. And after I moved to the city and started working as an English teacher, you know, I didn't see him that often anymore. And I was riding my bicycle to work one day down the main street, Diagonal in Barcelona, a wide avenue, a boulevard, in fact. And there are benches spaced along that road. And on one bench, I saw a man sleeping. And I started thinking, well, what's it like to live on the street and to sleep, you know, in the midst of all this traffic? And on the next bench, there was a man sitting who reminded me of my friend from the orchard. He had the same kind of scraggly dark hair, long with a beard. He was wearing a kind of a toque. It very much made me think of my friend. And so caught my attention. And as I then continued cycling, I suddenly had a flash, a thought came into my head. Oh, that's Maitreya. And Maitreya is the name of one of the Masters of Wisdom. He's like the elder brother of the Masters of Wisdom. Um,
And
and so I just
what was he doing on a bench in Barcelona? What do you think?
Well, he was sitting there wearing the kinds of clothes you'd expect someone who lives maybe on the street or in shelters or just doesn't have much money. He was wearing those kind of clothes, like clothes, but like not like, how can you describe the difference? It's like sort of mismatched things.
Well,
Um,
why was he doing that? I'm just curious what he was doing there.
Well, so what we've been given to understand through, you know, information that's been conveyed by Benjamin Creme's master to us through Benjamin Creme is that the Masters of Wisdom, well, they're working all the time because they don't need to eat or sleep. So they work 24 hours a day to help. Basically, they're always helping in many, many ways. And I'm sure we wouldn't understand a lot of it. But one of the things they do is that they appear to people to help them out, to give comfort, to give reassurance, to save people's lives, to teach people little lessons, give people reminders, all types of things. And so I think the reason he was there that day was to catch my attention, if I was ready to be, you know, to have my attention caught, and then to convey a little message to me. Because as soon as I had that thought, I stopped my bike and went over to him. And I thought, oh, I'd like to take a picture of him to publish in the magazine, in Share International Magazine. So I asked him, can I take your photograph? And he said, sure. But before we got to that, we were talking and he said, oh, are you a foreigner? Because I have an accent. We were speaking in Spanish. And I said, no, well, yes, I'm a foreigner, but I live here. Oh, okay, he said. Then I took his picture. And the first thing he said to me was, no, and I've got the sequence wrong. I think the first thing he said to me, as soon as I went up to him, before I'd said anything, he said, the God of everything that is wants you to be happy. And that was a powerful message for me because I'd been feeling depressed and anxious because I felt I wasn't doing enough to help spread the word about these Masters of Wisdom, about their existence and about Maitreya's existence and the return of the Masters of Wisdom to our everyday world to live with us and to help us remake the world in a better way on the basis of sharing. So I really was kind of down on myself at that point, worried that I wasn't doing enough and not feeling able to do more. And so when he said that, it was a huge, kind of like a bomb. It was like, what? The God of everything that is wants you to be happy. It was so simple, so straightforward. And I just felt overwhelmed with gratitude and love. Like, oh, thank you. That's so beautiful. Like, that makes sense. That makes sense. If God really is who God is supposed to be, it makes sense that that's what God would want, right?
Yeah.
Like, what else would God want for us?
Right. Exactly.
And then the rest of the exchange was just he asked me for some money to go buy a sandwich.
Yeah. And but I mean, that's another, I've heard this before when people talk about similar experiences, that the masters often appear in the guise of a homeless person, and it offers, I guess, an opportunity for us to serve, to do something. Obviously they don't need money.
Right. They don't need to eat, for
They
one
don't
thing.
need to eat. Wow, that's fantastic. I love these stories. They're just amazing, amazing stories. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us, Sabina. And
It was my pleasure.
I'm so grateful that we could have this conversation. You've been listening to Mystic Takeaway. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing and sharing it with others. Thanks for listening.